Okay, guys, this week we're going to kind of flip things around. So we're going to do a demo here for you guys to watch. And this week, your assignment is all about working with molds. I wanted to show you a couple of different kinds of molds that we have in the room. We're going to have molds that look like this. This is called a hump mold because you build over the top of the mold. Then you'll find some two-piece molds that go together. This one looks like and was made by one of our students to make an apple. We can use this as a press mold, but this one we can't use as a slip casting mold. And then you'll also find some molds that look more professionally made, like this one. It comes in two pieces as well, but it has this hole in the top that allows you to pour cast or pour slip in there and use it that way to construct your project. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each one and then show you what to do. And then in a typical year, you would be asked to, one, make your own mold out of plaster, and then two, make something with a mold. This year, I'm just asking you to make something with a mold. So let's talk a little bit about that. This piece is a little figurine, and it was made just by pouring slip into one of our cast molds, and it is very cute. It is well crafted. The glaze is very nice on it. There's not a lot of creativity to it, but this is somebody who's working on their craftsmanship, trying to get better at glazing. Somebody's trying to get better at using the molds. And so that's an okay, good, fine way to execute this project. This is a piece that was started last year, but that was never finished. The girl, Jaden, threw a pot on the wheel and then used one of our molds to make these little arms from a doll mold that somebody donated to the school. So those arms are giving this piece a little bit of a hug. So she's had to take on a little bit more creatively, but also in terms of her craft, being able to match the dryness of the pot to the piece coming out of the mold is another sort of craftsmanship challenge. So this is a little bit more ambitious project. Here's one that's maybe not quite as ambitious that I'm going to show you here, that I'm using one of our school homemade molds to make a cell phone holder. And another piece over here, the girl last year, Megan, made a mold of a mirror and then used one of the molds to make a face coming out of that mirror. So lots of different solutions, lots of different ways of attacking it. So let's talk about how we can use these. We'll start off just with the hump mold. Hump molds are nice because you can kind of lay things over them and then press them down. What I'm going to do is, instead of just using it to make the form itself, is I'm going to do something with these little coils that I've rolled out before I start to put a slab over the top of it. And I think I'll do something that makes kind of like just a stripe of coils down the middle. Some of them made it all the way and some of them didn't. Before I actually use this slab to cover that, I'm going to take my mold and I'm going to set it on top of my slab so I have a general idea about how big I want to make this thing. Got a board underneath here, and I'm going to go out like 3 fingers on each side. And after I kind of measure at first, I'm going to sort of guesstimate as I work my way around to cut. And then I'll take my scraps and do something else with them later. I rolled out this slab using the slab roller, so it's nice, consistent thickness. But before I put it on the slab or on the hump mold, I'm just going to give it a couple of wipes on this side and the other side, because I'm going to ask this to stretch. And oh, look at that texture. See, I didn't check it when I took it off of the slab roller, and so I've got all that texture on there. Now that could be something that you want to keep that you like, or it could be something that you want to get rid of right away with a little bit of water and a little bit of pressure. But either way, actually, in this case, I really do want to get rid of that texture, because remember, when you wipe down your slabs like this, you're going to make them more likely to stretch successfully without cracking, and that's what I'm going to ask this thing to do. So I forgot something, which shouldn't surprise you guys, because I always forget something when I'm doing a demo. But right here, I now have a bucket of water, which is what I wanted to be able to execute this. So I'm going to take my hump mold, I'm going to put it in the middle of my board. Doesn't have to be on a board, but I kind of recommend it. And then I would take my water, I'm going to paint over this. I could use a brush to do this as well. And then I'm going to get that slab, and I'm going to kind of line her up. And I'm going to set it down, and I want to gently at first start pressing on all sides. And then I'm going to take that sponge and that water. I'm going to add some water and pressure, so I'm not getting folds as much as I'm starting to change the shape of the slab. I'll turn around, we'll start pressing on this side. When I feel like I'm starting to get it to conform to the sides of that mold, I'm going to add a little extra pressure in the middle so that it doesn't get much thicker in the middle where I added those coils. But not too much pressure, because I want those coils to show. I don't want to smooth them out completely. At this point, I can kind of feel the edge of the mold hitting the board. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make like a little ridge with my finger going around. And then I want to cut on the outside of that ridge, so that I've got some extra clay to work with while this thing dries. As an addition to the bottom, I could take some of this extra clay and make myself a quick coil. Or a little slab. And it's very slippy already, so I won't have to do much here, except just kind of press that in the bottom. And I can make a little foot that I can clean up later so that it sits level on the table. And I'm going to let this dry. And when I start to feel like it's got enough dryness to hold its shape, I can pop it off. And this is where you guys who are working at home, while you're working at home, this is an advantage, because you can check it every couple of hours and pop it off when it's just perfect. You don't have to time it so that it's perfect when you get to class. So that's one way. It's a hump mold. We'll show you the results when you get to class. Press molds. Press molds, pretty simple idea. Going to take like a little ball of clay. This is the top of the apple. This is the bottom of the apple. I'm going to kind of squeeze the clay into a fat hamburger sort of shape in this case. and then start pushing down like I was making a pinch pot, but still leaving it a little bit on the fat side. Then that's going to get pressed down into my mold. And what I'm going to go do is I'm going to go around, I'm going to kind of feel to make sure that it's touching everywhere on the sides of the mold. And I'm going to smooth it out on the top. So I want it to be level on the top so that it'll sit right on top of this mold and that there wouldn't be any kind of seam. So I'm smoothing out this area right here. Going to repeat that on the other side. Got a little more clay for this one. And level that guy out. And then I'm going to let both of those dry until I can pop them out without them losing their form. Okay. If I'm going to wait quite a while, I might put the two halves together and let them dry kind of in there by themselves. Or if I'm going to do it in about an hour or less, I might leave them open like that and then come back and feel them every once in a while and check and see when they're ready to pop out. Like the press mold, if I want to do a slip mold, I'm going to take my two pieces, but this time instead of pressing in to there, I want to take a rubber band, which I brought over, but I do not see in front of me. Oh, there it is. Okay. And these are in the kiln room, just right inside the door where you would put down your stuff. I'm going to put that rubber band over there so that this is together solidly. And then before I started the video, I mixed up a bunch of slip in the blender. It's going to be over on the counter. What I did is I filled this up about halfway with water. Okay? And then I took some toilet paper, like 3 arm lengths, maybe a little bit less than that. Put that in there and I ran it on low until the toilet paper got all chewed up and is like small fibers just floating around in the water. Then I took about a grapefruit sized ball of clay and I took little pieces and put it into the blender until I started to see them sitting close to the top of the water. Put the lid on, ran it until I started to see a little whirlpool forming in there. Then I put a few more pieces in, okay, until I kind of completed my grapefruit size piece of clay in there. Ran it again until I saw the whirlpool, and that means it's going to be nice and smooth and ready to go. And basically, all I'm going to do is I'm going to pour this slip in until it comes up to the surface like that. I might give it a couple of little taps this way and this way to make sure that there isn't any trapped air in there. And then the first time you pour it in, you can go ahead and pour it right back out right away and let it kind of drip. And then you're going to let that sit for about 5 minutes, 2 to 5 minutes. Okay? After it's sat for 2 to 5 minutes, then you can go ahead and pour it in. And each time you pour it in, after the first time, you want to let it sit another 2 to 5 minutes. Each time you do that, it's going to get a little bit thicker. Now, you don't want to stop and start again the next day. This is a process that once you start, you got to keep going that same day. Because if the slip dries out and you pour new stuff in, it's going to soften up and fall away from the wall and the project won't turn out. So at least 3 pours, but probably more like 4 or 5 because this is mostly water. So when it dries, it's going to get really thin. So we're going to pour this a couple more times, and then when you come tomorrow, we'll open it up and see if we got a sitting bunny for you guys. So the last one I want to show you is how to make this guy. So this, guys, is just a simple idea. This is a form that somebody made in my class years ago. And what I did is I made some of these for my house, and we put our cords in there, and then you can take your phone, and it hangs on the wall, and it charges, and it's being held by the little pieces. So before I started the recording, I rolled out a simple slab. I'm going to take that slab and I'm just going to give it a few wipes, although this one isn't going to stretch, so it's not as big a deal. Flip it over, do the same thing on the other side to make it a little stronger, no cracks. And then here's that mold. It dried underneath the fan for about a half hour. And to pop it out of there, we're almost done. I'm just going to take a needle tool. I'm going to go in at a little bit of an angle. I'm going to start to lift. And I'm going to go in another spot at a little angle and start to lift. I'm going to keep going until I start to feel some movement on this. And then once I do start to feel that movement, I'm going to encourage it a little bit more. And here again is where, if you're doing these projects at home, you can catch it at just the right time so that you don't rip it, which is what I'm worried about. But I'm close. There we go. It's out. There are the fingers, and you can see. Now they've got a texture to them right now. I'm not going to worry about that as much. Just going to put them down on the table, get my knife. This is actually a hole cutting knife. It makes different size holes. I'll show you how it works in just a second. I'm going to cut away my excess clay right up to the edge. And here's where I would come do my fine tuning. But if I take a little bit of my scrap clay or a paper towel and I set that underneath those hands so that they stay up while it's drying, and then slip and score this little edge down here, and I take my hole saw, I put it in there, and I twist. I can go like 2 deep or 3 deep to make the size that I want. And then down here again at the bottom, I'm going to go in 2 or 3 deep, spin around a little bit so that it's big enough to accept the charging cord without it falling out all the time on you. I've got a wall hanging piece and I used a mold. I'm all done, Mr. Walter. Next project, please. So there's some ideas for working with molds. Sorry it's a longer video. I'll see you in class and we'll be able to just dive right in. There we go. Bye, ceramics too.